In the last century, nearly 70% of ponds have been lost from the UK countryside, meaning garden ponds have an increased importance for wildlife. Getting the position right for a wildlife pond is absolutely paramount. Now, looking around this garden, over the other side there is a closed fence, so it's not going to provide good access for wildlife. Whereas over here, there are open corridors through this fence where they can come through. This is also a great spot. It's partially shaded, and ideally you'd be looking for about 50-50 light and shade. Now, there's a misconception that for wildlife ponds to be effective, they need to be large, or you need to install a huge liner. But actually, that's not the case at all. I'm going to be using this old French wine barrel to plunge into the ground just here, but it worked just as effectively placed on top of a patio. In fact, size really doesn't matter. You could even use something as small as an old washing up bowl, and you still attract wildlife into the garden. This half barrel costs around £60. Make sure you soak your barrel beforehand to get the wood to swell up and make it watertight. The barrel's totally secure now, completely level, so it's time to think about the needs of the plants. They all want to be at slightly different heights, so I'm going to create what's called a marginal shelf around the back edge of the pool. And the great thing about using bricks with holes in them means that you create extra habitats for wildlife to hide away in. To get the most diversity in a wildlife pond, you want to get a really good, diverse range of plants. So I'm going for an iris to start with. It's a beautiful purple flower. Now, this is in an aquatic basket, which means it's absolutely full of holes. There's aquatic soil in there. Plants will root out of it, and it's very happy just to go straight into the pool as it is. This is an Equisetum. Stays evergreen year-round. Also really useful for so many wildlife species which will lay eggs and larvae on the base. Now I'm going to use this. This is Carex pendula. It's a transitional plant that can grow both as a marginal and as a woodlander. So I'm going to put this here and then plant some more on the far side so it transitions out of the pool. And the water spearmint is the final of the marginals, and it will slowly work its way across the surface of the pool, providing that essential shade, but also foraging areas for lots of insects that like to swim around and feed in the foliage. When you're filling up your pond, it's ideal to use rainwater from a water butt. Try and avoid tap water, as it contains chlorine. However, if you do need to use tap water, let it stand for a few days to allow it to neutralise, and don't use water from other ponds, as this can spread disease. For the centrepiece of this pond, I'm using a miniature water lily. Of course, it has the beautiful flowers that everybody knows, and it provides a habitat for water snails to lay their eggs on the back of the leaves. When you're planting your wildlife pond, cover about 70% of the surface with plants. This will reduce the chances of algal bloom, and it will also give lots of hiding places for the wildlife. Now all the planting's done in the pond, it's worth thinking about the peripheries. So I'm going to use rocks for a wildlife bridge and then further plants around the back. For a bit of contrast, I'm going to use this Ligularia. It prefers a slightly damp soil, so each time that the pond floods when it's rained, it will keep it nice and moist. And then the final element, this is Dryopteris filix-mas. And that will just help all the planting transition into everything else around it. Now, to keep the pool totally free of algae or duckweed, I'm going to use a special product. It's a dye, totally non-toxic. It won't hurt humans, it won't hurt animals, and it won't hurt your plants. Putting the gloves on just to make sure it doesn't dye my skin. And the way it works is that it knocks out a lot of the light, and so some of the pond nasties, like blanket weed or algae, are prevented from photosynthesizing. They only need the tiniest little quantity, and it'll keep the pool dark and weed-free for about 3 months, and then you just need to retreat it. Wildlife ponds are a great way of getting kids involved with the garden, with nature and with wildlife. If you're worried about their safety, you can use a steel grid or a mesh over the top of the pool to protect them from the water. Now that this is installed, it's going to bring all sorts of benefits to this garden. Not only is there a new growing environment to experiment with different plants, it's also a brand new habitat that will bring in birds, insects, and amphibians.